Russia's war economy has been crippled by devastating blows to oil. That's between sanctions and between attacks on refineries and things along these lines, to the tune of $15 billion. And it's growing. It's getting worse and worse over time. Okay, let's look over here, and we'll start with the Moscow Times. This was back in June, where it's talking about the $15 billion. Russia's lower house, State Duma, forecasted a drop of more than $15 billion in revenues in a wider deficit due to falling oil and gas earnings. Now, I said $15 billion, but that's in June, and that's before all the refineries that were hit in August. So I try to be conservative with what I say. I try not to overly inflate what I'm saying or look clickbaity. So that was in June. That's before we get to the 22% of refineries that have been targeted in August. So it's going to be north of that easily. The budget signed by President Vladimir Putin last December projected revenues of 40.3 trillion rubles, or 508 billion US dollars. So 15 out of 500 billion is what it's cost so far, and is climbing. The deficit, 1.7 trillion rubles, or 14.76 billion, about 15 billion US dollars, or 5% of GDP. That version allocated a record 40% of total spending to defense on national security. Okay, 40% is allocated that way. And yeah, and so it's impacting it. It's going to have a direct impact on the war. Under the revised plan, revenues are now forecasted to fall by 1.79 trillion rubles, or 38.51 trillion rubles. The deficit, rubles, that's 485 billion. Okay, the deficit is expected to revise to 3.7. Okay, so you're getting the idea. The changes reflect a stronger ruble, lower global oil prices. If oil prices were higher, that would tick back up, and further increases in military spending. Oil and gas revenues are now expected to total 8.32 trillion rubles, or 104.8 billion US dollars, down 2.62 trillion rubles from previous projections. Non-oil and gas revenues are forecasted to rise. Okay, so that's what's going on with the budget. Now, this is interesting. This is from energyandcleanair.org. Russia's fossil fuels. That could be coal, that could be crude oil, liquefied natural gas, pipeline gas, or oil products. So we're talking about oil primarily. Who takes in oil? Well, we're talking about crude oil that then goes and gets refined, it's China and India headlong, and then a little bit from the EU and some from Turkey. If it's oil products, that's Turkey, and then China, Brazil, India, in that order. We're talking about liquefied natural gas. The EU is the big taker of liquefied natural gas, followed by China and Japan, South Korea. We're talking about pipeline gas. Again, the EU is the big customer for Russia of Russia's pipeline gas, then China, then Turkey, Moldova. And there are only a specific number of countries within the EU that are doing that. Now, in the Alaska meeting, ExxonMobil, listen, just you got to read this to believe it. Putin offers American ExxonMobil return to Russia's lucrative Sakhalin-1 oil project if company lobbies against U.S. sanctions. The decree, signed during Putin's Alaska meeting with Trump, requires foreign investors to undertake actions to support the lifting of Western sanctions to regain their stakes. They really, really, really want those sanctions lifted. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing this kind of thing. Exxon, which operated a 30% stake in the project, took a $4.6 billion hit to exit Russia after the 2022 full-scale invasion, making it the only non-Russian partner to walk away. Meanwhile, Russian oil prices have crashed from $100 to $55 per barrel since the full-scale war began. Earlier, Trump told Putin to focus on Russia's economy, which is currently in a bad state, rather than continue fighting. So good on Exxon for not doing that, at least so far. Energy giants are unlikely to accept Putin's sanctions bargain. President Putin's August 15th decree appears to invite Western firms back to Russia oil and gas ventures, contingent on their lobbying for sanctions relief and funding commitments. Yet, analyst at KPLER, I don't know how you pronounce that, Kepler Insight, suggests that the gesture is unlikely to prompt action from energy majors such as Exxon or Shell, both of whom exited projects after Russia's invasion. Well, yeah, there's a reason that they're not going to do that. Okay, now we also talked about other sanctions and things like that. Who's buying Russian crude oil? That's like not processed, not refined oil. Almost 50% is coming from India, and then another 36% from China, 11% from Turkey. That seems surprisingly high, and then a number of other countries. Okay, so, well, what about the sanctions? Remember Graham and Blumenthal? They were like, yeah, we're going to do this to them and it'll be bone crushing. Well, here's Richard Blumenthal, and he was posting this, and this was just 2 days ago. Putin's worst nightmare isn't tariffs on Russia. It's scorching tariffs on his oil and gas customers, China, India, Brazil, and others, provided in our Graham Blumenthal bill, with 85% bipartisan Senate co-sponsors. The Graham Blumenthal bill can pass overwhelmingly. Monday's big power meeting should resolve to shut the spigot of oil and gas revenues, sending Putin's tottering economy spiraling down. Well, it's Tuesday and nothing happened. And I don't see anything about to happen because Trump is playing this like, I don't want to discourage Putin from coming to the table by putting on sanctions. You're encouraging him not to come to the table by not putting on sanctions or not working things out. Now, I talked about the $15 billion, and then I said, like, that was before anything happened in August. In August, it's been like, these are all, and this was only August 14th. There were still a couple hits after this. All the refineries that Ukraine hit, and it was 22% of their total capacity has been targeted. Not necessarily all of that put out of commission. There were stronger hits than others, but this refinery had 3%, or that refinery had 4.5%, or whatever. And some are in worse shapes than others. Now, then there's also this, the Rosneft refinery in Syzran and the Lukoil refinery in Volgograd suspended all operations due to the heavy damages inflicted by drones on August 14th and 15th. Together, both refineries have an annual production output of over 21.5 million tons of oil products. So at least for these refineries, they're out. So I don't know how much of the 21% is actually no longer, or 22% is no longer available, but let's say that half of it is. 10% of refining capacity is added on top of that 15 billion. And then we see things like, well, Bloomberg's confirming that Russia is now forced to export raw fuel oil instead of refined fuel products as refinery capacity increasingly lays in ruins. So fuel oil trades at a small premium compared to crude oil. So you're going to get so much for refined oil, and then a bit less for crude oil, and that's what you're left with. And then the sanctions should be dealing with the crude oil that would be traveling somewhere. So, okay. India's oil industry has become a global laundromat for Russian crude. That is, they take in the crude, then they refine it, then they sell it out to the rest of the world. Cheap oil is refined, resold worldwide, and Putin pockets hard currency for war. Washington warns India must choose business with Moscow or a real partnership with the West. This was in the Financial Times just yesterday. But nothing's happening yet. And the irony of, and I thought that this commentary was spot on, the irony of Trump bashing India for buying Russian oil is that Europe ends up being the biggest enabler. European countries are the top buyers of Indian oil refined from Russian crude. So India takes in the Russian crude, they refine it, then they sell it to BP, Exxon, Vitol, Tagfigura, Aramco. Yeah, I mean, like, that's still Russian oil, even if it's refined in India. Okay, the EU imported liquefied natural gas from Russia worth approximately 4.4 billion euros in the first half of 2025. So it's not just oil, it's also natural gas. And again, it's not everywhere in Europe that's doing this. It's like Hungary and Slovakia are the big players with this kind of thing. This helps Russia to murder Ukrainian civilians. The latest Ukrainian sanctions package come into effect yesterday when Ukraine attacked the Druzhba, that's the Friendship oil pipeline. That's how they do their sanctions. They just destroyed the pipeline. This means that neither Hungary or Slovakia won't be getting their oil through the pipe for quite some time. Last year, Russia supplied around 95,000 barrels of oil to Hungary through the pipeline. And then the conclusion was, when the West is too weak to act, Ukrainians improvise. And here's the comment on, I don't know if this is Twitter or from what it is and it's translated. The Druzhba oil pipeline is resting, what a way to put it. Complete stoppage of oil pumping for an indefinite period. Greetings from the birds of SBS. Oil pumping station, Tambov region, Russian Federation, deflowered by the birds of the 14th Regiment of the Unmanned Systems Forces of the Armed Forces of the Ukrainian SSR. Eyes and sting worm horror, now quiet and peaceful. Okay, so that's what they're doing. They're putting their own sanctions by just destroying it. Hungary had relied on Russian oil. Ukraine turned off the tap. Druzhba pipeline is fully offline, and Ukrainian drones hit deep into Russia, disabling the pumping station yesterday. Budapest complained. Kyiv answered, talk to your friends in Moscow. And then here's Peter Sajario. He's the foreign minister from Hungary, and he's complaining about this. Ukraine has once again attacked an oil pipeline to Hungary, stopping oil transportation to our country. This latest attack on our energy security is outrageous and unacceptable. I made a comment yesterday. Was it yesterday? I guess it was yesterday when I was talking to Greg and Johnny Pierce about like Trump would make total sense if you just took any morality out of this, right? I mean, like, because the morality of Russia bullying Ukraine, going over their border, instead of like, if you just took that out and just like, oh, well, might makes right and so on and so forth, whatever. I mean, just that's how it works. If you took that out, and so same kind of thing here. It's an attack on your oil and energy security. It's outrageous. Well, what about the outrageous stuff going over there? Don't you care about what's happening to the Ukrainians? The answer is no. Russian deputy energy minister said that Russian specialists are trying to restore the transformer station needed for the pipeline to operate as quickly as possible, but cannot yet say when shipments will resume. Brussels and Kyiv have been trying to drag Hungary into this war in Ukraine for 3.5 years now, and this is the goal of an increasing number of Ukrainian attacks on our energy security. No, you're missing the point. The attacks are to deprive you of money. That's what it amounts to. Okay, so at any rate, they conclude, finally, a reminder for Ukrainian decision makers. Electricity from Hungary plays a key role in Ukraine's energy supply. So they're going to threaten them back. You understand why they're doing this, right? Like, the Druzhba oil pipeline is down. Pumping is halted indefinitely. Ukraine's 14th UAV regiment struck the pumping station in a Tambov region, leaving it burning. As commander of Magyar put it, the most effective sanctions delivered by Ukrainian drones. That's what they have to do. And that's going to deprive them of resources to be able to fight the war. Satellite pictures show that the large parts of the facility are completely destroyed. It's obvious that the entire Druzhba pipeline from Tambov region in Russia all the way to the west is rendered inoperative for quite some time. Here's the pipeline. And this was the hub that was destroyed. Okay. Slovakia has also halted oil deliveries through the pipeline as well. Ukraine's general staff reported a strike at the pumping station here. And so it feeds both Hungary and Slovakia. And, well, there we are. Okay. Now, meanwhile, just a few interesting things along the way. In Russia, gas prices are just skyrocketing. And so it's not just that they can't sell it somewhere, but it's also domestically affecting Russian customers. Gasoline prices continue to scream upward despite oil on the world market falling. Now it takes one of Putin's slaves, and here he's talking about just Russians, 15% of the median Russian monthly salary to fill the average car. 15% of your month to fill the car. And for context, in America, it's about 1%, maybe a little bit less, depends on how much money you have, but about 1% of your monthly salary to fill your vehicle. That's a big difference, and it's going to keep getting worse. Meanwhile, Russia was being stupid yesterday, or was it yesterday or the day before, with the attacks, I guess, 18th yesterday, with the deliberate attacks on Azerbaijani oil and that is supplied into Ukraine that they're selling in their gas stations and that sort of thing. And Azerbaijan is just looking for an excuse to do something worse to Russia. So that was an unforced error on Russia's part. The U.S. has spent months imposing sanctions on Chinese refineries for buying Iranian crude as part of a maximum pressure campaign on Tehran. So I'm wondering, and if you know anything more than I know about this, put it in the comments. I'm wondering because if they're focused on Iranian crude, as opposed to Russian crude. Maybe they're just not as interested in the sanctions on China for that reason, because the greater threat that the U.S. is focused on in their minds is Iran, not Russia. Not that it shouldn't be, not that they should be not thinking of Russia as a great threat, but maybe that's what's happening here. And then finally, I'll leave you with this image: biggest oil refinery in Russia. This was on August 1st, the beginning of these attacks, being sanctioned as we speak. Yeah. So when I said that it was 15 billion, it's far more than 15 billion. But again, I'm trying to be conservative and make sure that I have my facts straight. All right, my friends, that's all that I have for you right now. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. Tell me what you think in the comments below. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.